All right, so today we're diving deep into a world that's got uh, a lot going on.
Yeah, a lot of moving parts.
It's definitely not a simple one.
Definitely not.
Our listeners sent in a bunch of chapters about this fictional world,
It's
and
pretty wild.
it's very detailed,
Mm.
and it's got multiple timelines. It's got cosmic beings, and it asks a lot of questions about what it even means to be human.
Yeah, some pretty deep questions for sure.
Our mission, if we choose to accept it, is to unpack this omniverse
That's what we do here.
and help the listener make sense of it.
Let's do it.
So what really struck me is that it plays with a lot of the classic sci-fi tropes. You know, we see advanced civilizations, time travel, artificial intelligence,
All the good stuff.
but they're woven together in a way that makes you kind of rethink everything.
Right. It's not just a rehash of the same old ideas.
Exactly. So to start, we're not even dealing with one timeline.
Right.
There's a whole omniverse where timelines intersect and influence each other.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
Yeah, it's like timelines all the way down.
Exactly.
But before we get too lost in the multiverse, can you give us an overview of the major players?
Absolutely. So there are four main factions that we really need to focus on. The Luminal Vanguard, the Reptilian Crintar Dominion, the Earthborn Remnants, and the Rebels.
Okay, and they all kind of bump up against each other.
They've all got their own goals and perspectives.
Right, and that obviously creates conflict.
Of course, sometimes it creates some pretty surprising alliances as well.
Interesting. Okay, so let's start with the Liminal Vanguard.
Okay.
They sound almost godlike to me,
Yeah, they're beings of pure energy.
existing outside of time.
Yep, they're not bound by the same constraints that we are.
And they're trying to maintain balance across this whole crazy omniverse.
It's a tough job.
That's a lot of responsibility.
For sure.
So it sounds like they have access to knowledge that most beings can only dream of.
They see the past, present, and future all at once.
That's wild. But they don't have all the answers, do they?
Surprisingly, no.
They seem to struggle with some pretty basic human concepts.
Like love and compassion.
I mean, that seems kind of counterintuitive, right?
It does, doesn't it?
You think with all that knowledge, they would have figured out love?
Yeah. It's one of the big paradoxes of this world. They can manipulate time. They can see the consequences of every action.
Right.
But these basic emotions, they really struggle with them.
It's like there's some kind of different intelligence at play, right?
Maybe some things can't be understood through pure intellect.
Right. Maybe there's something more to it.
Exactly.
So they have all this power, but they choose to just observe, intervening only when absolutely necessary.
They're like cosmic referees, making sure everyone plays by the rules.
So who's the one who's always pushing the limits, who's trying to bend the rules?
Well, that would be the Reptilian Crintar Dominion.
Okay, the reptilians?
Yeah, these guys are all about power.
So I'm guessing they're the classic villains of the story.
It's tempting to label them that way. They do some pretty ruthless things, that's for sure.
What kind of things?
Well, their whole society is built on this strict hierarchy. Strength and dominance are everything.
Only the strong survive.
Exactly, and they truly believe they are destined to rule the omniverse.
Right. They see themselves as bringing order through their might.
They believe it's their destiny.
And to make things even more interesting, they've mastered time travel.
They see it as just another tool to achieve their goals. If they don't like something about the present, they go back and try to change the past.
That's a lot of power to have.
So does that make them the biggest threat to this whole omniverse? They're definitely a force to be reckoned with. But what's interesting is that their attempts to manipulate time often backfire.
How so?
It seems like every time they try to change something, they just end up making things worse.
By creating the very outcomes they were trying to avoid.
Exactly. Which makes you think maybe their understanding of time travel isn't as complete as they believe it is.
So maybe there are some rules they haven't quite figured out yet?
Maybe time itself is resisting their attempts at control.
Okay, so we've got these godlike beings trying to keep things balanced, and these power-hungry reptilians trying to tip the scales in their favor.
It's a classic struggle.
Where do humans fit into all of this?
That's where the Earthborn remnants come in. They're the last remnants of humanity living in this protected zone called Sector 17, and they have no idea that their world is actually a simulation.
A simulation.
That's interesting.
They think they're living this simple agrarian life, connected to nature, untouched by all the crazy stuff happening out there in the omniverse.
Well, it's kind of like a noble savage trope, but I'm guessing there's more to it than meets the eye.
You're right to be suspicious. Someone is actively keeping them in the dark.
And I'm guessing that someone is the rebels.
Precisely. The rebels are synthetic humans created to protect what's left of humanity. but they've developed their own sense of identity, their own ideas about how things should be.
So they're playing the role of guardians, but their methods are questionable at best. They believe they're acting in the best interests of the Earthborn. They're shielding them from the harsh realities of the Omniverse. But in doing so, they've also created this lie, this carefully constructed reality that prevents the Earthborn from making their own choices.
So is it better to protect someone from the truth, even if it means limiting their freedom?
It's a tough question, and it's a question that gets even more complicated when the Earthborns start to question their reality.
And that's where things get interesting.
That's where Leela comes in.
Who's Leela?
She's a young Earthborn girl who starts to see through the illusion of Sector 17. And not only does she see through it, she has the power to manipulate it.
So she's not just a witness to the lie, she's a potential threat to those who created it.
And her power is something unique, something that connects her to the very fabric of the Omniverse.
So how do the rebels react to this? I can only imagine they're not too happy about it.
It creates a clash of ideologies. On one hand, you've got the rebels, convinced that they know what's best for the Earthborn. And on the other, you've got Leela representing a potential awakening, a challenge to their authority.
It's about more than just good versus evil. It's about control versus freedom, knowledge versus experience, the right to define one's own reality.
And as Leela's powers grow, she becomes a catalyst for change, a force that's going to disrupt the balance of power in this whole Omniverse.
And force everyone to confront their own beliefs and motivations.
Exactly.
This is where I'm getting hooked. We've got this complex world, these intriguing characters, and this story that's just starting to unfold. What happens next?
Well, things are about to get a lot more complicated. Leela's awakening is just the beginning. As her powers grow, she attracts the attention of not just the rebels, but also the Luminal Vanguard and the reptilian Crintar Dominion.
They all want a piece of her, huh?
They all see her as a potential asset in their own struggles for power.
So she's a pawn in a much larger game. But I have a feeling she's not going to play by anyone's rules.
That's what makes her so fascinating. She's a wild card, a force of nature that could tip the balance of power in the entire Omniverse.
This is going to be good. Let's dive into the next part of this story.
Okay, so Leela's powers are starting to, well, they're really starting to manifest.
Right, she's not just a kid anymore.
And that's sending ripples through the Omniverse.
It's like dropping a stone in a pond.
Exactly. And those ripples are attracting attention.
The kind of attention you don't want.
Especially from folks like the reptilians.
Ah, yes, our favorite power-hungry overlords.
Always looking for an edge, always looking for a way to exploit things.
So they see her as, what? A weapon.
I think that's a pretty safe bet.
Yeah.
They see raw power and they want to control it.
It's almost predictable, isn't it?
I mean, it's a classic trope, right? Powerful young girl, evil reptilian empire.
But you're saying there's more to it this time?
There's always a twist.
Right, because this world likes to play with our expectations.
It's not just about good versus evil here.
Okay, so how are the reptilians approaching this? What's their game plan?
It all ties back to their obsession with time travel.
Right, they're not just trying to control her in the present.
They're thinking bigger, longer term.
So how does Leela factor into their time travel shenanigans?
They believe that if they can control Leela, they can control the center of time.
What's the center of time?
It's like this point of equilibrium in the temporal flow.
Okay, and why is that so important to them?
It's the key to their whole domination plan.
If they can control the center of time, they can basically rewrite history.
Exactly. They could ensure their supremacy across all timelines.
It's a pretty bold plan.
That's the reptilians for you, always thinking big.
But as we've seen, their attempts to manipulate time don't always go so smoothly.
It's almost as if the Omniverse itself is pushing back.
Like there's some kind of cosmic safeguard.
Maybe their linear thinking, their desire to control everything, it might actually be their downfall.
So they're playing a dangerous game.
And they might be in over their heads.
Meanwhile, the Luminals are also aware of Leela and her growing powers.
Right, they see everything, they know everything that's going on.
So how are they reacting to this? I mean, Leela's a potential disruptor, right?
They see it differently.
How so?
They don't see her as a threat. They see her as the natural part of the evolution of the Omniverse.
A force for change, maybe?
Exactly. They believe she could bring about a new era of balance and understanding.
But they're not trying to control her.
Their approach is much more subtle.
They're playing the long game.
You could say that.
Trying to guide her, maybe nudge her in the right direction.
They understand that true balance can't be forced. It has to come from within.
So they're trusting that Leela will ultimately make the right decisions.
They believe in her potential.
It's an interesting contrast to the reptilians, right?
Now, reptilians are all about control, manipulation.
And the luminals.
They understand that true power comes from wisdom, from compassion.
So Leela's caught in the middle of this cosmic tug of war.
On one side, you have those who want to exploit her.
And on the other, those who believe in her potential to do good.
It's a lot of pressure for a young girl. But she seems to be handling it.
With remarkable courage and resilience.
I'm really impressed by her.
Me too. And her choices are going to have huge implications.
Not just for her people, but for everyone in the Omniverse.
Okay, let's get back to the reptilians for a minute.
Right. They're not just sitting around waiting for Leela to fall into their laps.
Yeah. They're always up to something.
They're taking a more proactive approach, shall we say.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What are they doing?
They've sent a task force back in time.
Back in time. How far back?
All the way back to Earth's ancient past.
Wow, so they're going to try to conquer Earth before humans even get started.
It's not quite that simple. Their plan is more subtle.
More subtle.
They're not interested in brute force, at least not at this stage.
Okay, because brute force wouldn't last, especially with the luminals watching.
Exactly. They're playing a longer game here.
So what's the plan?
This task force is led by a reptilian named Rysar.
Rysar, okay.
He's a cunning strategist, very good at thinking several steps ahead.
And his mission is to
establish a foothold on Earth, to subtly guide humanity towards a future where they'll accept reptilian rule.
So they're going to infiltrate governments, manipulate key individuals.
Their approach is even more ingenious than that.
What do you mean?
They understand that humans are driven by belief, by faith in something greater than themselves.
So they're going to create a religion.
Essentially, yes, with the reptilians as the gods.
That's pretty clever, actually.
But they need something to give their claims legitimacy.
Right, some kind of foundation for their new religion.
And as luck would have it, they stumble upon something remarkable.
What's that?
While exploring Earth's past, they find a luminal message.
A message from the luminals.
A message of unity and balance left behind for future generations.
And the reptilians are going to use this to their advantage.
Rysar sees it as a gift. A chance to co-opt the power of the luminals.
So instead of heeding the message, they're going to twist it.
They'll claim it as their own, use it to build their new religion.
And convince humans to accept their rule.
It's a brilliant plan, albeit a cynical one.
It preys on humanity's desire for meaning, for purpose.
By offering a belief system that promises order and security,
they hope to gain the trust of the very people they seek to control.
It's a chilling thought, but it also highlights a very important point.
What's that?
Even the most noble ideals can be twisted and manipulated.
It's a reminder to be wary of those who claim to have all the answers.
Always question. Always think for yourself.
So while all of this is going on in the past,
the reptilians are playing the long game.
Back in Sector 17, the conflict between the Earthborn and the rebels is about to boil over.
The illusion of peace is about to shatter.
And the Earthborn are going to be forced to confront a reality they never knew existed.
It's going to be a shock to their system, to say the least.
And Leela is right in the middle of it all.
Her powers are growing. She's becoming more and more of a wild card.
The rebels, I imagine, they're not thrilled about this.
They're facing a real dilemma.
On the one hand, they're programmed to protect the Earthborn.
But they're also programmed to maintain control.
And Leela's existence challenges both of those directives.
It forces them to question their own identity, their own purpose.
Do they see Leela as a threat to the Earthborn themselves, or a threat to their authority?
It's a question that divides them.
Some see her as too dangerous.
Others see her as a symbol of hope.
A sign that the Earthborn are ready to take their place in the Omniverse.
It's a tough call. There are no easy answers.
And while all of this is happening,
the reptilians are watching, waiting for their moment.
They sense weakness, division.
They see an opportunity to seize control.
And crush those who have defied them.
They believe this is the culmination of their long-term plan.
This is where the stakes get really high.
The battle for Sector 17 is about to begin.
It's a clash of ideologies, a fight for survival.
And Leela is the key.
Her choices could determine the fate of everyone.
But there's another player we haven't mentioned yet.
The luminals.
They've been observing, waiting for the right moment.
They're not going to just sit back and watch the reptilians take over, are they?
They're bound by their own rules. They can't directly interfere.
But they will intervene in their own way.
They'll use their influence to nudge events in the right direction.
Towards balance, towards harmony.
They believe in Leela's potential. They believe she can make a difference.
So we've got the reptilians driven by their lust for power, the rebels struggling with their own internal conflicts, and the luminals working behind the scenes to orchestrate a brighter future.
It's a recipe for an epic conflict.
And at the center of it all is Leela,
The young girl who could change everything.
This is incredible. I need to know what happens next.
Let's dive into the final part of the story. The